Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast, is for anyone interested in leadership and the wins, losses, and lessons of being an executive. We are two women who have successfully navigated C-Suite roles and are sharing our experiences. We will be bringing on guests to tell their stories and want to spark honest conversation and discussion, which may include swearing and lots of laughs. Join us on this adventure. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast. I'm Juliet, and I'm here with my collaborator in crime, Susan Sutherland. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Juliet. How are you?
I'm well. I am so glad that our audience is here with us. This is a couple episodes into our second season, and that's been so exciting to be able to have a second season, and we're grateful for all the people who've been listening so far. We have an amazing guest today. Her name is Janéa Jackson, and we'll introduce her in a minute. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit, Susan, about mental health, because it feels like that's something we're all working on right now at the beginning of this 2025. It's been very interesting. How are you doing?
So timely. I've been thinking about this question a lot. In fact, in part, because I've had to think more closely about how I'm managing my own reaction to what's happening in the world. And I'm curious about what your strategies have been, Juliet.
Well, it's interesting because I went on a trip in mid-January and came back and came down with RSV. And I was actually in bed for 7 days straight, which has not happened to me ever, and maybe when I was a kid. So I could only focus on my physical health, and I wasn't attached to the outside world during that time period. I was literally in bed. I was watching TV kind of on my iPad, but just staying, I guess what I call it is being really small. I could only work on the things that were immediate and the needs of my body at the time. And so for me, it was a great break in a way. I hated being sick, but it also kind of centered me and got me back to what's important, which is physical health. And I think, one of the things about that was that I wasn't exercising regularly, which is something that I generally practice. And that scared me a little bit to get out of that. But I think just having that requirement of taking care of my physical health has helped a lot. The recent noise I'm trying to work on. I live in a town called Sebastopol, which is north of San Francisco, and it's nicknamed Peace Town. And it's just a lovely place, and kind of this theory of we're all in this together, and it's very, it's all about finding joy, and that we can continue to find joy even when there's noise and scary stuff going on out in the world. And so that's kind of where I've been going with it. How about you?
Well, I think I've mentioned to you, and even on this podcast, that one of my goals, ambitions, aspirations for 2025 is to really work on my healing my nervous system, trying to get myself to not be reactive. And I generally think that I'm not, but then I notice that I'm wound pretty tightly. So since late last year, late 2024, I've been trying to do breath work daily and then doing meditation and visualization in combination with that. And the breath work I think it's like a little mini experience like you had when you were sick. Like it only lasts for me 10 or 15 minutes, but it just brings me right back to the present and shifts, I think, obviously my brain chemistry. It doesn't last all day, but I can also reset by doing, 3 deep breaths like we're supposed to be doing anyway. But that's been huge. And probably the main thing, which I don't do very well, I will confess, is being a little more discerning with my media consumption, especially social media, because there's, drama on social media. And I'm trying to get my news through reputable sources, and by reputable, people who I like the way they write. I like their perspective. I would say Heather Cox Richardson is probably my number one hero. She writes almost every day. She brings a historical perspective, and she grounds her perspective. I wouldn't say it's opinion, it's more perspective in history, and relates it to how the United States has gotten where it is now through time. So, and that's tricky. It's hard to turn off. I mean, I'm a New York Times reader. It's hard to not look at the paper every day, even if it's online. But I can't. It just sends me to a very dark place very quickly. So
Absolutely.
I really want to talk to Janéa about this too, but maybe we'll
Yeah, we're
wait
gonna.
till we officially introduce her.
I know. I'm very excited. Yeah, I think one of the things that I was realizing is kind of all my work in emotional intelligence really comes into play here is what are you bringing into the room? Because if we allow that noise to come into the room, we're allowing it. And so we do have a choice. And I think thinking about that and reminding ourselves that we have a choice as to kind of our reactions to things is really important. Given that, I think it's time to introduce our guest. I'm very excited to be in the Zoom room with Janéa Jackson, who is the CEO of HomeRise, a San Francisco-based nonprofit dedicated to providing permanent supportive housing, yay, and long-term solutions to homelessness. She is currently leading HomeRise through a major financial and operational turnaround, ensuring the organization's long-term stability and sustainability. With expertise spanning organizational leadership, housing policy, financial turnaround strategies, and nonprofit governance, Janéa is a transformational leader in permanent supportive housing. As she continues to navigate this pivotal turnaround, her focus remains on driving innovation, strengthening operations, and securing long-term solutions for housing stability in San Francisco and beyond. Welcome, Janéa Jackson.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we're really
So
excited
happy
about
that
that.
you're
Yeah, definitely. And what important work and what a time you joined this organization. So we're excited to hear about that. I want to just start by asking you, how did you navigate your career to this point?
It's been not a straight path. It's definitely been a zigzag of unexpected and expected opportunities that came up. So I was a very long-term federal government employee, just shy of 15 years before I left. And I was pretty set on, moving up that chain, becoming an SES, moving to Washington, D.C. once my children were in college, and just continuing to contribute, to the betterment of our federal government. And COVID happened, we're still talking about COVID, yes. But COVID did happen. And it made me reassess if I was really happy with how I was contributing to society. Granted, I've been doing amazing work for the federal government. The work that I had been doing for those 14 years just has incredible impact on not just the systems, but also real people. I was the director of asset management for multifamily West region in San Francisco. And so we managed like all the Section 8 FHA loans, Section 202, 8011, really important subsidy programs that keep people housed and keep them, healthy, safe, inside, right? Really important programs. But I had been in that position for almost 5 years at that point, and frankly was getting a little too comfortable. And I thought, a recruiter reached out to me, and at first, I kind of was like, no, I don't think this is the time to leave the government. And then something really interesting happened. I had jury duty, and it was in a city where I live, and it was a really unfortunate situation where a son killed his father. And I had incredible empathy for the son going through, the process of hearing everything that happened and the evidence and whatnot. And of course, meeting the mother having her come on the stand and talk about her child and hearing, all of what was happening and the story of this person who did something incredibly tragic that's just unfathomable normally, and it made me realize this intersection that played in with housing, mental health, food insecurity, like all these different things that were converging in this really adult child's life that created this environment where he was not supported. He wasn't supported by his community in the ways that he needed to be supported. He wasn't supported by his parents the way he needed to be supported. And frankly, the systems and family systems also failed his parents as well. And then I went back and thought, hey, an opportunity came to me and I looked the other way. And here is an opportunity where I can help people be the best versions of themselves by first making sure they have housing security. And then what I love about HomeRise is we, also provide wraparound services for folks. So we meet you where you're at. Doesn't matter if you're coming to HomeRise with, drug problems, alcoholism, mental health instability. We meet you where you're at. We bring you into our family and help you meet whatever your goals are. And I thought, this is something that I need to do. I was like, this is something where I can make a difference. I can help this organization that really was frankly struggling coming out of the pandemic for a lot of different reasons, stabilize and really stick to the core of its mission while also extending its life as well. So I'm really happy to be doing the work I'm doing. I feel actually very lucky to do it. And was definitely something that came from the pandemic kind of shaking up my perspective on how I can be a better asset to the community that I'm a part of.
Wow.
Great story. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just in awe. What a gift. And to be able to see beyond the crime of this person to kind of all the factors that play into it, I think is just kind of a beautiful human moment. And that's just wonderful. Thank you for that. So you got an offer to join HomeRise as their CEO. And what was the process like moving from government work into it's still the public sector in a way, but it's very different and has interesting challenges on its own. And I know you had you're working through some challenges with HomeRise itself. So tell us a little bit more about that.
It was a huge transition. It was huge. I think the federal government is, about systems. Everything's about systems, processes, and procedures. And to add to that, before I came to HUD, I was with Department of Defense, right? Department of Defense, and then GSA. Department of Defense is very much so about like process and procedures as a way to do everything. There's checks and balances with everything. And then I come to this nonprofit where COVID kind of shook everything up and we still hadn't kind of came back to center with our operational procedures. And, someone who loves processes and procedures and working with people is dropped into a system where I love working with the people, but everybody's doing things which way. And the need to kind of remind folks, okay, like for us all to work well together, we have to know who's on first, who's on second, who's on third. We need to know when you're moving from first to second. We need to know when you're moving from second to third. And, to help staff, as a team, start thinking through, how can we, our job is to deliver the absolute best services and support for our residents. So how can we do that working as a team and as a system? So that was very interesting. The first 3 months were definitely a very interesting kind of time of research and getting to know staff and looking under all the different rocks and, learning about all the different people. It was really, really interesting. And the most interesting thing that I learned was that we were functionally becoming bankrupt. So
Wow.
we had to make some decisions pretty quickly. And that was really hard. But that was also something I would have never had to do in the federal government, which was really kind of make those kinds of decisions around reorganization and restructuring.
Was this the first time your boss was a board of directors
Yes.
as opposed to a boss? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd love to hear more about that too.
Yes.
How did the board welcome you and help you navigate what sounds like a pretty tumultuous time for the organization?
They were incredibly important, incredibly helpful. Again, I'm coming in without a lot of the background information of what happened to get us here as well. Also on the eve of knowing that there's going to be a San Francisco's controller's audit that's going to land sometime in the future. Don't know the date in the future, have an idea what the contents are going to be, but not exactly sure exactly what the contents are going to be. So the board was incredibly helpful in terms of giving me kind of like high level understanding of how we got here and what the decisions were made in the past that might have put us in some of the positions that we were in. But at the same time, they're wonderful at like giving me space to learn what I needed to learn and to make the decisions I needed to make, in coordination with my C-suite team on how we were going to really navigate our ship through these really difficult waters. The interesting thing about it too was the board was very helpful in helping to introduce me to other CEOs in our network. And as soon as I started kind of getting out there and meeting everybody, I started to learn really quickly, we're not the only ones going through this. Okay, so what's the common denominator here? Because yes, we had some things going on here, but not everybody could have had what we had going on. So why are we all landing in similar situations, having to really kind of reimagine the sustainability of the permanent supportive housing model, and really start to think through, all right, what's going to change? Like what are we going to reimagine? Because this product is so incredibly important to our country, to San Francisco, that it has to continue to exist. So what are the pivots that have to be made in order for it to continue for it to become sustainable again? And what COVID taught us was plan for lots of uncertainty, plan for change, right? So the known changes, how do we position our organizations to weather them? But then how do we also start to position our organizations to weather the storms that we don't see coming? With political changes. We won't go into the beginning of 2025 quite yet, but there's a lot of unexpected things that we just can't plan for anymore. So we have to have this contingency mindset while also staying like true to our mission. And it's been, the board was very, very helpful in kind of helping me wrap my head around that kind of visioning and thinking through like how do we then, bring that style of thinking into, the structure of our business.
Yeah. I just want to appreciate what I'm imagining is the transition from your prior role into being the CEO in the nonprofit sector where your boss is a group of people and also an organization in crisis for a variety of reasons, all of which you had to kind of suss out and then and are currently rebuilding. I mean, I just sort of think about that sort of transition as being that expression from the frying pan into the fire, I guess. So many different challenges confronting you all at once. And it sounds like you really very quickly figured out where some things were broken and what needed attention. But it also sounds like it's an ongoing process. So I just had to say that out loud, that I really want to appreciate all that you've been through in the last couple of years. That's mega change for you personally, for you as a
Absolutely.
leader. Yeah, for HomeRise as an organization, that's a lot on a lot of fronts.
Yeah. So, Janéa, tell us a little bit about how you navigated those first 3 months and what kind of decisions, hard decisions, you had to make in order to start that ship turning around.
The first thing I realized very quickly is that we have a phenomenal workforce. So proud to see how committed our workforce is to really taking care of people. And I know that sounds very basic, but that's what it is. It's taking care of people, folks just going above and beyond no matter what it takes. Sometimes we have fires, floods. I mean, we rally and it's all hands on deck. And it just gives me goosebumps when I see that no one questions like roles and responsibilities. They look at, okay, like we're in a crisis. What do you need me to do? Let's sit down. Let's talk about how we're going to get this done and let's go and get it done. So I was very proud to see that happen very quickly. And when I first came on board, because unfortunately the part of our business is that there are, emergencies that happen. Had an amazing CFO. That role is so incredibly important to the work that we do here. Yes, we like just Sergio Perez. Sergio, shout out to you. And he really, was kind of given a scrambled box of chocolates, and had to put, each chocolate back into the right slot, and really did it with just a lot of care and urgency, which was really important because, we were really having to look at, our ability to pay our bills. And, very quickly, it became very clear that, we needed to, make some decisions that weren't going to be popular, but that we're going to keep HomeRise here for another, hopefully 35 years. We're a 35-year organization. Our anniversary is this year. So like things like pausing our vacation buyouts, very unpopular, had to do it. I had to do layoffs. I chose to actually sit down with every single person that we laid off. And I wanted to sit with them and tell them thank you, that, though, the organization cannot continue to have them as part of the team, I wanted them to know you're still one of us. Like you're still an important part of who we are. You've been an important part of our journey. This reorganization, it's that bad relationship. It's not about you. It's so, but it was really important to me that I sat down and had that conversation with every single individual, because this work is really hard. It takes all of your soul to do it and to do it well, all of your being. And I didn't want any of our staff, even as they were leaving our organization, to not feel that they're accomplished, and that they were needed and that they're important to our mission. So, that layoff happened in October. I came in June, and then that layoff happened in October. So it was in pretty short order that we had to make those decisions, and then also managing through what that means to folks, right? Because you don't want folks running towards the door and heading out because they feel like a ship is sinking. And having to make sure I exuded that confidence, like, hey, no, we've got it. The things we're doing here is making sure that, like, that I got it, that me and Sergio are working this really tightly with our other team members. Keep doing what you're doing. Like, you're here because we need you to be here. Your jobs are super important. But like these changes are so that we can be here for another 35 years. So please, like, trust me in that. And I know you don't know me yet either. So it's hard to trust what you don't know yet, but believe me that I have this organization's best interest at heart. And that's hard on morale. Change management is hard. Especially
Huge.
when people know you.
100%. And you also mentioned when we were talking before that you had everybody come back to the office. Is that still the case? And that, just at a time when there was a lot of There's a lot of controversy around that. And what was your philosophy when you made that decision?
Well, that decision wasn't made lately either. Again, it's like taking those first 2-3 months to see what's going on, and realizing coming out of the pandemic that, we are a people-based business. Our outcomes are based on our ability to touch people's souls and connect with them and love on them and help them feel like they don't just have a home, they have a community. It's very hard to do that virtually. It's very, very hard to do that virtually. And so having our leadership team all sitting at home 5 days a week, some not 5, others 3, some 4. It was just all over the place. I felt was out of alignment with our core values as an organization. And also all of our folks who are in our buildings doing this work face to face during the pandemic, right? How does that make them feel when their leadership is sitting at home and they're at the buildings, gloved up, at the beginning of the pandemic because nobody knows what's going on, gloves, face mask, nobody knew what was happening at the beginning of the pandemic, but how does that work? Like, how does that create like cohesiveness in your team? It doesn't. And so in order to live our values, we have to live our values. So bringing everybody back to the office 5 days a week was also a show of solidarity. And I know that, for some folks, it didn't feel that way, but I also felt if you didn't feel that way, maybe this isn't the right place for you too. Not at this point in time, and it's okay to vote with your feet. That's fine. But we need to have like a team who's got each other's back and that everyone understands like our values and is willing to live them. So that was a very important decision I made. There definitely was some fallout. We've lost some like very good people. On the flip side of it, like our budget kind of needed it too. And so it helped with not having to lay off as many people.
Has it brought the kind of cohesiveness, Janéa, that you had hoped for initially, recognizing there's some people who left, but the remaining team in office, have you seen the positive impact of that?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the goal, right? Is we want everyone to feel like a team, one team. I always tell everybody we're one team, the Frankie Beverly song, "We Are One." That's my anthem for our organization. We are one. And, I really see that in how we interact now. We don't have the divisions that we still have some divisions, but in terms of like how we work together, it's improved immensely. Our ability to get business done better because we have better relationships with each other. People give people more grace under fire, right? There's a lot of things that happen. This is a stressful environment. The work is not easy. Being able to give people grace on certain days when they're not, having a great day. It's easier to do that when you've seen them on great days, when they're doing well, everything's happy. Like, you had a big win together, and then, you can't build that kind of relationship, to give that kind of grace if you haven't already put in that work on the front end to build those relationships. So we've been really intentional about just creating spaces for people to come together and to celebrate each other and get to know each other. That was part of the byproduct that first decision to bring everybody back into office 5 days a week. Now, we don't have everybody back in office today 5 days a week. I think we have folks working from the office 3 days a week. But that has been an integral part of just building that cohesion.
Yeah, they were able to come back and connect, develop relationships that allow them to have more flexibility now, as opposed to it being just a byproduct of COVID and that just being, you have to do it, but making it more strategic and intentional. And that sounds great. I mean, it sounds like some of these decisions were so hard, and I've talked about permanent supportive housing on this podcast before as being the solution to homelessness. And I think that what HomeRise is doing is just incredible. So I want to encourage listeners to look up HomeRise and learn more about you, because we don't have time on this podcast to go into it deeply. I do want to ask kind of the key question that I like to ask every guest, which is, what was one secret you've discovered about the C-suite when you joined?
I think the big secret I learned was it's like a bit of like a whack-a-mole. You're always, there's something new that you're learning and something new that you didn't anticipate coming up, and you've got to problem solve on it pretty quickly in short order. And so that was, I think, was a little bit what wasn't expected, was the speed by which we would be problem solving a lot of different things that would come up. And not having a solution already canned and having to work through a solution together as a team.
Yeah. And then getting back to what you were saying early on, is to do it in a way that is systemic, and responding it systemically to an unpredictable whack-a-mole experience is sounds like a contradiction in terms, but of course that's the goal, I think.
It is the goal, right?
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it, is if you do it once, right, then you want to have a roadmap for how to do it twice and do it better the second time. And so that's been a lot of what we've really focused our organization around, is like codifying processes and procedures, and then making sure that we train everybody on them so that we can repeat. It was like rinse, wash, repeat, right?
Yeah. Janéa, I want to shift the question and ask you something a little bit more personal, which also ties into how we started our podcast, just Juliet and I talking about mental health. You've said several times in our conversation with you that this work is really hard and you have to bring your soul to it. So at the end of let's just make the time frame really short. At the end of a really long day, how do you take care of yourself and reset so that you go back into the office the next day with a positive outlook and your leadership cap on and your soul intact?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I'm a pretty introverted person, but I think folks would probably not realize that. And I live out in Fairfield. So I get a lot of decompression time getting home, whether it's taking the ferry or driving. That time there is really important for me to kind of gather my thoughts for the day and to start to put them in the compartment on the side, right? So that when I get home, I can open up this other compartment that's for my family. I have 3 kids. They're 14, soon to be 13 and 9. And so when I get home, I want to be the best version of mommy for them. So I've really learned how to compartmentalize that. I can't say I'm great with exercising. I wish I was. What I've gotten really good at is giving myself a lot of grace, not looking for perfection. My children are getting older, so they can do more as well. And I ask them to do more. I don't cook by myself anymore. My children cook with me. I don't clean by myself. My kids clean with me. And it's time that I use to connect with them, like hear how their day went, share how my day went, lessons that I can share from my day with them as well. So that they kind of understand like adulthood is a continuum, really. That sometimes they think like, mommy is this perfect person. I'm like, no. I'm not perfect, but like, these are the problems I solved today. What were the problems you solved today? And we talk about it. And I'm raising 2 girls and a boy. My girls are incredibly brilliant. Just put together little people. Well, they're not little anymore, but I want them to understand that like in life, it's not about the problems. It's how you're working to solve them and how you're working to make things better. I always tell them, don't be the problem, solve the problem. That's one of our family mantras. And so I like to make sure when I get home, I have the capacity to do that, and then when it's time to put them in bed, then that's my time, when I get to I bought a little steam room thing for myself, and I love steaming. And, I have like my own little self-care rituals that help get me ready for the next day and help me feel like I gave my all for the day. And now it's time to move on and do it again.
Wow. I think you're one of the only people I've ever met, Janéa, who actually found their commute not the opposite of decompressing. In other words, commutes are usually stressful and not really fun, and you just want to get to the next destination. But it sounds like you just keep showing up present to everywhere you are, which is a beautiful thing.
Fortunate, I think.
Your family sounds amazing too.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a half. I tend to always see the positive in things as well, and I think mindset is everything. And how you choose to process. And how you choose to process what's going on and how you choose to use your time are the two things that you have like incredible control over. And you have to choose wisely. I can't say that I do it perfectly all the time, but that is a conscious effort to try and see the bright side of things and to do things that kind of build me up and build other people around me up as well. Because there's no point in it's more fun to move in community than it is to move by yourself. And I really live that in how I function at work and at home.
Wow. HomeRise is so lucky to have you. This is so inspiring. I thank you so much. With that, I think we're going to close. Oh, Susan, you got something?
I just wanted to pile on with what you're saying, Juliet. I think we are so incredibly lucky that we've had a chance to meet and talk with you tonight, Janéa, or today, depending on what time zone you're in. It's really been a pleasure. And listening to you talk about how you do your fairly complicated life and a big job has been, as Juliet says, truly inspiring.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. Thank you, Susan, for having me. This was a lot of fun. And I appreciate you making space for me to share a little bit about my story and about HomeRise as well.
And I'm sure that our listeners who are typically, they're a range of people. I think we have some emerging leaders who are looking up at or out towards their horizon and saying, who do I want to be later in my career? And part of what we want to do is show them a pathway, but also bring people who they can aspire to be like. And I think you've done that in spades today.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Thank you. And I want to thank our listeners for joining us today for yet another podcast of Secrets of the C-Suite. Please join us again in 2 weeks.
We're so glad you've joined us for this episode of Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast. We'll be back with another episode in 2 weeks. In the meantime, please tell your friends and coworkers about us, and be sure to follow, subscribe, and give us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed listening. Secrets of the C-Suite is produced by Juliet Clothier, Susan Sutherland, and Brian Clothier. Original music is by Brian Clothier, and the podcast is inspired by leaders like you.